I'll just talk a little bit about this idea of delusions and hallucinations, just to sort of finish up the formal part, and I'd love to talk to people. I can stay a while if you need. Um, this is where even people that try to avoid medications kind of fall off the wagon, because when people start seeing things or hearing things, you feel like they need an antipsychotic pill. And once again, I have some opinions about this which are very different from most of the medical profession. And they're not based on research, they're based on my personal experience. And a lot of neurologists will probably listen to me and say, no, you're wrong, but I'm not. This is what I feel about hallucinations and delusions. I think that they are way, way overdiagnosed. I just heard somebody say at ADI conference that in stage 3 of dementia, 40% of people have hallucinations. I don't believe that. I've been doing this for 20 years, 30 years if you include my outpatient practice. And I have rarely seen people doing what I call hallucinating. And when they are hallucinating, what it usually is delirium, not dementia, but they're having a drug reaction or they're infected or something's going on. Or if they're not truly hallucinating, maybe they're misperceiving their environment because of their different worldview. And we're calling it a hallucination, just like Mr. D said his wife was delusional when she said I had to go to work. He misinterpreted her view of what she was doing. And what happens is somebody writes in the chart, so-and-so is delusional, and then it gets passed along and it becomes true because we say it enough times. So the first thing we need to do is we need to find out if someone looks like they're hallucinating or delusional, go to the source. Find out from them what they're seeing, what they're feeling. And if you can do it at the time of day and the location where it happens, that's even better. Because, you know, people have changes in their eyes, cataracts, macular degeneration, hearing problems. Maybe they see a shadow by the closet that looks like a person. Maybe there's a glare of light off the mirror that looks like something that they're misrecognizing. So if you can see them and talk to them, you may get insights into what really is going on. I had a case where this was really early on in my nursing home career where it was really brought home to me that it's good to go see the person and find out what they're seeing. I had a gentleman who had Parkinsonism with his dementia, and those people are very difficult to treat with Parkinson medicines because there's a very fine line between making them less stiff and making them see things. Because drugs like Cinemet cause a lot of visual hallucinations when they're overdosed. And so every 2 weeks I was going up on this pill and waiting to hear if he was moving better, and I was waiting for that inevitable call. And sure enough, one day I stopped up on the floor and they said, oh, we got a problem with Willie. He's seeing bugs on the wall. And so I said, well, most of the time, I got to admit, at that stage in my career, I would have either lowered the Cinemet dose, maybe added an antipsychotic, and walked away. But I decided to go see him, and I'm glad I did because I learned something. I went down the hall, and of course my mind is all over the place. I'm not really being present because I'm thinking about, well, Willie was a German prisoner of war during World War II. His wife has dementia. She's somewhere else. He's always wondering where she is. He's getting Cinemet. I'm wondering what the heck could be going on. Could he be sick? And so I finally said, okay, I got to focus. I got to center myself. And one thing you need to do when you see somebody with distress is find that calm center. I'll talk about that in a moment. You have to start by centering yourself because your nonverbal language speaks volumes. And you can say calm things, but your emotions and your body language will trump what you're saying every time. And people try to say nice things, but because they're stressed, because the person is stressed, they're just covering up all their words with all this body language. So I tried to center myself. I went in, I kind of got in his world, and I sat down and I said, Willie, how are you doing? It's Dr. Power. And we talked for a second about how he was doing. And I said, you know, Willie, the nurse tells me that you're having trouble seeing some bugs in your room. And Willie said, that's true, doctor. And I said, well, tell me, what do they look like? And he said, well, it's kind of hard to describe. And he starts, you know, doing this, rubbing his chin, looking around the room. He says, they look sort of like, well, sort of like that. And I turned around, and this cockroach went running across the floor. So Willie didn't need Haldol. Willie needed an exterminator, okay? So the first rule of hallucinations is when someone says they're seeing bugs on the floor, go see if there are bugs on the floor. Or go see if there's shadows or glare or what people are hearing. I had a lady said, I think I'm hallucinating. I hear music at night in my room. And the woman next door was playing a radio real loud because she was hard of hearing and it was coming through the wall. So go find out what the person's doing. There are lots of ways we misinterpret what we see and hear. People say, I hear voices at night. What's it like in care environments? Conversations outside the door, intercoms, you know, radios playing, televisions, all these things that can be misinterpreted. Someone says, I was raped. That can sound like a delusion. But if personal care is undignified, if it's done by a stranger, if you're inserting a catheter, that can feel like an assault on somebody. Joanne Rader, when she did her Bathing Without a Battle video, the first thing she did to research it was she went to her trusted coworkers, people she knew and loved, and she said, I want you to bathe me the way you bathe your residents. And this was no half-hearted play. They stripped her naked, put her in a chair, took her to the shower room and showered her. And she said it was an embarrassing experience, even knowing the people that she did. And she told me things like, when she's in the shower, she loves to just look up and just have the water splash on her face. But when someone did it holding the nozzle, it terrified her because she couldn't control the flow of water. And so it's a whole different experience when someone else is doing it to you. So it's very important to try to understand how people might interpret our care. Here's a delusion that's got to be a delusion, right? They're poisoning the food. I mean, that's classic, right? Paranoid schizophrenia, right? So how many nurses have somebody that don't like to take pills, and so they take the pills, they crush them up in pudding, and we say, have some pudding. We don't say I've crushed up your pills so you won't know they're there. And you know what? If you give somebody crushed up pills and you tell them it's food, you are poisoning their food. And they know it because it tastes horrible because it's got crushed up pills in it. It doesn't taste like Jell-O pudding pops, it tastes terrible. So we have to think about how we label things and whether they really are or not. And I just want to tell a story about hallucinations and delusions that really, once again, drives home what a relationship can do with people. And I tell this story in my book about a woman I call Bertha, and Missy is her care partner. Missy was her nursing assistant at the home, and then she became an LPN, continued to work through her schooling, and stayed with Bertha. Is still with her. Bertha's been with us probably 8 years, maybe, on hospice at a very low level of physical function, cognitive function, and yet she's still going on. But about 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago, one summer, she had a problem. And the funny thing about Bertha, she never had distress of any kind. She's this cute little lady, about 4'10", has a wig that's never quite straight, And she's always very polite, very low voice, and she doesn't know me. I'd see her every 60 days for routine visits. And I'd say, hey, Bertha, it's Dr. Power. Can we go down to your room and do a little checkup? And she'd always say, no, thank you. No, thank you. But Missy would see me. Missy would come over and say, come on, Bertha, we're going to see the doctor. And she'd jump right up and walk down the hall. So this was our routine. The three of us would have a visit every 60 days. And nothing ever happened to her for years. And then one summer, we went to see her, and nothing happened. And I'm walking back to the nursing station with Missy, and I said, boy, Bertha is always stable, isn't she? And Missy said, yeah, there was just that thing a couple weeks ago. And I said, what do you mean? Nobody called me. What happened a couple weeks ago? And this is what Missy told me, that one day Bertha was sitting in her usual seat in the corner of the TV lounge, and she was shaking uncontrollably. And Missy ran over and said, Bertha, what's the matter? And she was sure that her son, whom she called Junior, was being attacked by vicious snakes. Now, if this doesn't sound like a delusion, what does? And I have to admit that if they had called me that day, I would have checked her urine, I would have checked her meds, but I probably would have given her a few doses of something because she was frightened to death. This is a very scary delusion. And I said, what did you do? Because she didn't call me. I was there that day. She said, well, first of all, I got her out of that noisy lounge. There was TV and there was commotion, and I just couldn't focus. So I got her to a quiet place, and I sat down with her, and I held her hand, and I said, everything's okay. I know you're scared, and just connected with her, and she calmed down. And when she was calmer and she could hear me, I said, everything's okay. Junior's not being attacked. Let's talk to him. She called him on the phone, and once again, she waited till she'd validated and calmed Bertha. She didn't just try to hold the phone up while she was shaking. She started at the emotion level. Christine Bryden says she believes that people with dementia are moving from logic into emotion and finally into spirit. She knows that you start by connecting at an emotional level. Words will not be heard until you validate where the person is at. And so she did. And then when Bertha was calmer and she'd made that connection, they called Junior. He explained to her he was fine, that there were no snakes, everything was okay. And she was calmer still. She gave her a snack, sat with her. She said it was 10 minutes past my shift. But I stayed with her till I was sure she was okay, signed her out, and went on my way. And it hasn't happened since. Now, if you read the medical textbooks, they'll say when you get to this stage 3, Bertha's stage of dementia, it is common to have hallucinations and delusions. No doctor would have been called out for starting her on an antipsychotic that day and keeping her on it for the rest of her life. But it's now been about 6 years almost, and she has been saved hundreds of doses of medication, which could have killed her by now, because of one intervention by somebody she knew and trusted. And that's one of the culture change lessons, is that she knew and trusted Missy. If I walked by her that day and tried to calm her, with all I know, it may not have worked because she didn't know me. She didn't have a relationship with me. She might not have trusted me when I said everything is okay. So that relationship, and that has staffing implications, rotating staff, using agency, a lot of implications about how you operate to create relationships. The other lesson is that Missy works in a particularly empowered environment where her nurse manager didn't slap her hand because she took care of something herself and didn't call the doctor or wait for permission to do something and intervene. And the last lesson, which is kind of interesting, is that in this case, Bertha is African American. Her son is a tall, sort of muscular, good-looking gentleman. And it occurred to me later that this occurred, I believe it was the summer of, may have been 2005, but it occurred at a time when every other TV commercial was Samuel L. Jackson in Snakes on a Plane. And we were just talking at the break about how TV is such a double-edged sword. And so once again, just putting people in front of this kind of sensory assault without any kind of processing can be a very dangerous thing. But Bertha's still with us, and she's still doing as well as she can do, and the snakes have never returned, thanks to Missy. So once again, I think that people like Missy are going to be much more available than any pills we have coming down the line over the next couple of years.